Your political opponent isn't stupid. Neither are they evil. They literally see a different reality than you do. And I can prove it, with brain scans. Did you know that, for example, on Instagram, men and women, even a couple in this case, receive completely different, predominantly polarizing and conflict-stirring comments on the same post, while conciliatory ones aren't shown at all? This serves as a teaser for a partial answer to today's question and a preview of part 2 of the series. Do you remember when it was possible to have different political views without friendships and families breaking apart? When people could have critical discussions without violent fantasies about the opposing side becoming almost commonplace? Before the trenches had grown so deep that even the German parliament building itself is now getting one. If you are interested in how this came to be and how we might find a way out, please stay with me despite the next words. Donald Trump. A meaningful pause while your neurons are now firing off various emotions and expectations. Correct? Donald Trump will play an insignificant role in today's episode, specifically a satirical art parade held in his dishonor. The way this event was intended, however, is apparently perceived completely differently by conservatives and progressives. By now, one might even say, yes, we really do live in different worlds, at least in terms of perception. So why is this massive golden god emperor figure of Trump both a huge joke and highly interesting at the same time? The punchline lies in the fundamentally different perspectives and perceptions of reality between the left and the right. For a long time, we have known some of the reasons why we seem to have lost the ability to communicate. Namely, because we literally live in different perception patterns of moral foundations and therefore different realities. Social media further amplifies this divide. What exactly does that mean and what does it look like? Stay tuned to find out. One of the main sources for today's video will be The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, described by the New York Times as a landmark contribution to humanity's self-understanding, as well as Dr. Jonathan Haidt's Moral Foundations theory. Additionally, I will attempt to draw connections to Dr. Iain McGilchrist's The Master and His Emissary, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. As always, you can find some links in the description. I will be referencing widely accepted psychological principles for memory, and any nuances, perspectives, or contextual insights are always welcome in the comments. These books, in my opinion, provide a solid framework for understanding how, over the last 10 to 20 years, political discourse has become so entrenched that even the youth organization of different parties seem to wish death upon each other. We will also return to this topic in part 2 of this series, XX versus XY chromosome-shaped human children, as generational divides in Gen Z and Gen Alpha appear to be increasingly aligned along gender lines. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. A quick summary for Generation TikTok. Our perception, including our sense of morality and values, is shaped by many factors, especially the environment, culture, and socioeconomic status in which we grew up. Additionally, our brain is divided, with only one hemisphere capable of speech, and the two differ fundamentally in perception and base programming. Dr. Haidt argues that morality is based on a set of fundamental values, including care/harm, fairness/cheating, loyalty/betrayal, authority/subversion, sanctity/degradation, liberty/oppression. He specifically suggests that left-leaning individuals tend to instinctively reject the idea of sanctity, more on this and Donald Trump later in the video, and insist that no value should ever override another. In contrast, those on the right generally consider all values important, but are more open to prioritizing certain values over others depending on the situation. This, combined with social media echo chambers, creates a highly volatile mix. For example, according to the NGO Stand Together, which conducts weekly surveys with 1,000 Americans, 86% of respondents say they cannot define anything positive about the opposing side. Here's a quick overview of what we will cover today. First, the sense of self and self-image, the need to see oneself as moral. 2. Self-image under pressure, emotional reactions. 3. Haidt's moral frameworks and games. 4. Perception of values in social media. Can we still engage on equal footing? 5. God Emperor Trump, meant as satire but celebrated nonetheless. 6. Conclusions, solutions, psychology and learning perspective taking. 1. The moral self-image. And I apologize in advance if some of this must be briefly summarized for time's sake. Each of us sees ourselves as the hero of our own story. That's why we have a fundamental need to justify our actions to ourselves and see ourselves as the good guys, at least as long as we don't fall under the dark triad personality traits of psychopathy, sociopathy, or narcissism. To achieve this, our minds create narratives that allow us to maintain this self-image, even when our logical reasoning might tell us it's justified for morally corrupt individuals to suffer or even die. Do you recognize the deviation from traditional definitions of tolerance and democracy? Looking ahead to the upcoming episode 6 Reasons Why the World Has Gone Mad, one could speculate that, in the absence of deeper meaning, worlds provided by religion and other institutions, the disillusionment, trauma, and post-World War nihilism, and the critical theories that emerge from it, have left an inner void. Each individual attempts to fill this void in their own way. Many psychologists and psychiatrists support the idea that this phenomenon contributes to the fanaticism observed in youth protest movements. Modern ideologies fill the vacuum left by disillusioned nihilism and, as a result, acquire an almost religious level of zeal. 2. The self-image under pressure. To keep this section brief as well, did you know that our beliefs are not just part of our worldview, but also become a part of how we see ourselves? We tend to make what we believe a fundamental part of our character. This explains why people often react so intensely and emotionally when confronted with information or arguments that contradict their beliefs. More on this in the closing remarks. The decline in resilience and stress tolerance in our society, along with the fact that we are at times deliberately worn down through constant fifth-generation psychological warfare, will be explored further in parts 1 and 2 of the upcoming 6 Reasons Why the World Has Gone Mad episode. 3. Haidt's moral framework and the concept of games. Haidt argues that we all have an instinctive moral compass, shaped by our socializations and values. However, these instinctive perceptions, how we assign moral weight to different issues, are shaped by our personal preferences, which in turn are influenced by many factors, including the values instilled in us during childhood, observations of our society, and personal experiences. Your brain doesn't construct a complex argument for every situation. It simply makes you like or dislike something on an instinctive level. In other words, you have built-in tendencies, preferences, and biases. Over time, these preferences become deeply ingrained. This is where things get interesting. One reason we see such aggressive and irrational reactions to political discussions is that people tend to integrate their beliefs into their self-image. When belief X is challenged, it feels like a personal attack, leading to extreme emotional responses. Haidt also explains, which ties well into the game theory topics often discussed on this channel, that humans operate within 3 different types of games. First, the political game, which includes elements of conflict and war. Second, the learning game. Third, the social game, getting to know others. However, due to increasing polarization, largely fueled by social media, we are now almost exclusively playing the political game. Instead of trying to understand each other, we are in a constant state of ideological warfare, dragging this must-win-at-all-costs mentality into every aspect of life.
There's no place in this culture for that much more wise, deep and reasonable way of talking, in which, yes, on the one hand, there's something in that, but what about this? And we've just lost that. We have to go for a single, very simple, black and white message, and most of those that go on in the culture wars are the most ridiculous examples of this taken to an extreme.
But it's spreading into school. It's spreading down into high schools. It's spreading down. I just got a memo from my daughter's elementary school. They're going to be doing what they call health class, but it's basically social justice programming. Now, I want my kids to be exposed to a diversity of views, but if it's only going to be ideology of the left, and this is in health class for 5th graders, that's not appropriate. Let's leave the kids out of the culture war.
Can we still engage on equal ground? How many Alternative for Germany supporters, for example, actively try to put themselves in the shoes of an outraged rainbow-haired activist? How many consider the possibility that she may have endured terrible experience that shaped her aggressive stance? Or perhaps she simply feels such an inner emptiness and lack of direction that her ideology is the only thing giving her stability, a way to cling to something that feels positive, offering simple answers in an overwhelming, chaotic world. From her perspective, she may be experiencing a very real subconscious fear of a political opponent, manifesting as heightened aggression. Likewise, a Green Party member sitting across from a Christian Democratic Party politician, Wolfgang Bosbach, might not see a man advocating for nuanced historical or economic understanding. Instead, they may perceive nothing more than an embodiment of the old establishment, bordering on authoritarian nationalism. And honestly, some of this is relatable too. Yes, there are real problems. The frustration of this woman in the picture seems genuine. Just look at how she's practically torturing her poor index finger while speaking. However, considering that the so-called firewall breach between the RFD and CDU was merely a non-binding policy recommendation, one might fairly categorize this reaction as hysterical. Meanwhile, just days after, left-wing parties voted with RFD support to increase lawyers' fees, suggesting a certain level of political hypocrisy. To add another layer of irony, if just 5 votes had opposed the measure, it would have failed. Yet over a dozen MPs from the SPD, left and Green parties were absent. Fourth, the divided brain and the illusion of moral certainty. Dr. Iain McGilchrist, in The Master of Hemisphere, argues that modern society is dominated by the left hemisphere of the brain. But, as with all things, balance is essential for an accurate perception of reality. The left hemisphere thinks in absolutes. A statement is either true or false. A picture shows either a rabbit or a duck, but never both at the same time. The right hemisphere perceives nuance and connection, allowing for complexity and ambiguity. This ties directly into Jonathan Haidt's research on moral values. Left-leaning individuals in particular struggle with the idea that certain values, example harm versus care, might need to be deprioritized in specific situations for the sake of other moral concerns. For instance, if one violates the principle of care even once, they may be permanently seen as morally irredeemable, forever cast out as belonging to the other side. When US Vice President J.D. Vance called for a return to shared values, public reaction was revealing. Instead of seeing an appeal for unity from a NATO ally raising legitimate concerns, many simply saw an extension of the Orange Man and the Tech Bros, a proto-fascist daring to question the sacred measures enacted to protect democracy, showing leaders today are convinced they hold the absolute moral high ground. This brings us to a key reason for Trump's enduring appeal.
They're declaring the end of the Trump era. Now, okay, I can see how in New York you might believe this is the end of his era. I'm just being honest with you. I live in Ohio amongst the poor whites. A lot of you don't understand why Trump was so popular, but I get it, because I hear it every day. He's very loved. And the reason he's loved is because people in Ohio have never seen somebody like him. He's what I call an honest liar. That first debate, I'd never seen anything like it. I've never seen a white male billionaire screaming at the top of his lungs, "This whole system is rigged," he said. And across the stage was a white woman, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, sitting over there looking at him like, "No, it's not." I said, "Now, wait a minute, bro. It's what he said." And the moderator said, "Well, Mr. Trump, if in fact the system is rigged, as you suggest, what would be your evidence?" You remember what he said, bro? He said, "I know the system is rigged because I use it." I said, God damn. No one ever heard someone say something that true. And then Hillary Clinton tried to punch him in the taxes. She said, "This man doesn't pay his taxes." He shot right back. "That makes me smart." And then he said, "If you want me to pay my taxes, then change the tax code. But I know you won't, because your friends and your donors enjoy the same tax breaks that I do." And with that, my friends, a star was born. No one had ever seen anything like that. No one had ever seen somebody come from inside of that house, outside, and tell all the commoners, "We are doing everything that you think we are doing," inside of that house. They just went right back in the house and started playing the game again.
He makes working class and lower income voters feel seen and understood. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris didn't fail due to shadowy influence or external manipulation. She lost because the Biden administration was willing to spend billions overseas, but couldn't muster even 1,000 in relief for struggling Americans, while lecturing them on how great they supposedly had it. A major problem, according to Dr. McGilchrist, is that the left hemisphere of the brain does not understand implications. This, in turn, also includes the ability to appreciate things like the beauty of nature, music, and, most notably, our values, narratives, myths, and rituals, all of which are nothing without their vast context, which entirely escapes the left hemisphere. Which then brings us to some rather amusing misunderstandings, such as 5. The Trumperor. At this point, I must ask many of you to endure any cognitive dissonance you might be experiencing for a few seconds and take a moment to look at this compliment an Italian artist dedicated to Donald Trump. Well, at least that's the first thought to someone on the more right-leaning end of the political spectrum. When I first saw it, I immediately had a suspicion, which turned out to be true. I mean, a massive, golden, ornately armored figure wielding a flaming sword of the Archangels, accompanied by ranks of uniformed devout Muslims, marching in a blue and gold Marine honor guard. Yeah. Well, if you truly despise purity, then yes, the criticism makes sense, which was been found for the left, for example, to be an absolutely despicable value. But still, the artist has created a visual language that, while perhaps odd or silly, is nonetheless subtly impressive. And we all should be aware of why, for example, it's called spelling. In this case, the artist has essentially demystified what he intended to convey and even actively reinforced some associations, conclusions and solutions, practicing mindfulness, psychology, and perspective taking. The left hemisphere of the brain focuses on already known knowledge and conclusions, treating separate, explicit facts as distinct from each other, things one might already know one wants. The right hemisphere, however, functions in the opposite way. Everything seems interconnected. Nothing is ever completely certain or definitely fixed. This does not mean chaos, but rather that there's a greater flexibility for mental maneuvering. The right hemisphere is highly attuned to implications, nuances, and interconnections, things the left hemisphere fundamentally struggles to grasp. McGilchrist himself does not explicitly draw this conclusion to my knowledge, but to quote myself briefly, doesn't this remind us strongly of Dr. Haidt's claim that conservatives are more open to the idea that one milieu must sometimes take a backseat to the other? Finally, we must return to Dr. Haidt's observation on social media and the recent findings by Stand Together. The division is most evident when one's own side party is attacked. At such moments, many people are willing to abandon the shared fundamental values of a free democracy and even tolerate violence. Thus, the problem is not just a technological one, but a deeply human-made issue.
Information used to actually be something we sought out. I don't know if you remember those times, but it used to be that you had to actually reach out to try to find things. Now, we're all hit by a fire hose of information. Most of all, it's almost all free, and we're just trying to not drown. And so that changed everything. And then that fire hose of information becomes really toxic between 2009 and 2012. People don't understand how much social media changed in those years. It wasn't polarizing before 2009.
Polarizing politicians who define themselves not through content and competence, but through aggressive, anger-stoking rhetoric are the clearly identifiable drivers of everything we are witnessing today. It should be in all our interest to call on these politicians to return to the composure of a statements like Helmut Schmidt, rather than adopting the rhetoric of a Trump. Dear fellow world citizens, openness is important and necessary, and in an ideal world, we should be able to discuss anything. But if you ask for the upteenth time why exactly we don't eat the cherries that literally have great in the name, then go ahead and help yourself if you must. But please do not insist on cooking for everyone and labeling those who politely or even vehemently refuse as things that should, be by standard or defamation laws, be legally actionable. For more on topics like the deliberately engineered societal division between men and women, subscribe to the channel and check out the upcoming episodes. This, as the left-right divide appears to be deepening, particularly along gender lines in the younger generations. But wait, why was this video so conservative-leaning and exclusively citing conservative thinkers and researchers? Well, for one, my urge to destroy is quite under control. I've internalized my shadow, as Young would say. So please subscribe to the channel to also catch the upcoming episodes, The Shadow, the monster within us all, as well as how to recognize psychopaths and narcissists. My goal is to mediate between the fronts, as I share the desire for a good life for all, and a deep aversion to wastefulness with any Antifa member, some of whom I even helped secure lectures on right-wing networks.
It's very easy to destroy and tear down. And I think one of the things that's so tempting for many people, because the world is so troubling to so many people, and so many people suffer in this world, and a lot of what the liberal left tends to rely on is that sense of indignation that a lot of idealistic people feel, because there are things that are deeply wrong.
However, regarding the soundness of analysis by many critical social science academics, you can look forward to the episode The True State of Economy and Academia, featuring an in-depth examination of the Harvard scandals. As previously mentioned, the dominant mindset in these circles is unfortunately not "why is this so?" but rather "because black and white, and I manipulate the statistics to confirm what I already believe." If you choose to stay with me, especially if you hold different opinions, deepest respect and appreciation to you. And as a parting note, here are some recommendations.
What does that mean?
To take something in.
Okay, excellent. To absorb. Anyone?
Everywhere, all the time.
So what is ubiquitous assimilation?
Always absorbing everything, everywhere, all the time.
Well done, George. How are you to imagine anything if the images are always provided for you? Who here read 1984 last year? Good. Anyone? Meredith?
Having two opposing beliefs at once and believing that both are true.
Excellent, Meredith.
Why do you always suck his dick, you fucking kiss ass?
To deliberately believe in lies while knowing they're false. Examples of this in everyday life. Oh, I need to be pretty to be happy. I need surgery to be pretty. I need to be thin, famous, fashionable. Our young men today are being told that women are whores, bitches, things to be screwed, beaten, shit on, and shamed. This is a marketing holocaust. 24 hours a day, for the rest of our lives, the powers that be are hard at work, dumbing us to death. So, to defend ourselves and fight against assimilating this dullness into our thought processes, we must learn to read, to stimulate our own imaginations, to cultivate our own consciousness, our own belief systems. We all need these skills to defend, to preserve our own minds.
Make composure courses for politicians great again. See you in part 2. Thank you for your attention. This concludes my elaborations.